The movie is based on a true story, beginning in Massachusetts in November 1951. Here, we see two men, Bernie and Gus, who have come to meet two ladies for a date. Bernie has been corresponding with one of them, Miriam, for months, but has never met her in person, so he's extremely nervous. When they finally meet, Bernie notices how beautiful she is, and the two have an instant connection. The four of them then go to a pub and spend the evening drinking and having fun together. The group then talks about the thrill of riding a small boat, but it turns out Miriam is very afraid of the sea. So, Bernie, who is in the Coast Guard, decides to borrow a larger boat from one of his acquaintances, who readily agrees. Miriam is excited by this and kisses Bernie before they get on the boat. The scene then cuts to February 17th, 1952, where we see Bernie and Miriam dancing at a party and having a good time. While enjoying the moment, Miriam asks Bernie if he will marry her, but he unexpectedly refuses. An angry Miriam storms outside, and Bernie follows her, explaining the dangers of his job and the unpredictable stormy weather. He tells her that he might not even return home, so Miriam asks if he is afraid of the sea or of marriage. After some thought, Bernie realizes he doesn't want to lose her and wants to get married, so they choose April 16th as their wedding date. However, due to his professional rules, Bernie says he has to seek permission from his commanding officer. A few days later, about 9 miles northeast of Chatham, Massachusetts, the oil tanker SS Pendleton is struggling against a powerful storm. At first, things still feel somewhat normal. Some sailors are resting, others are napping, and the cooks are chatting in the galley. Suddenly, the ship is struck by a violent jolt, sending objects crashing to the floor and tossing some crew members out of their bunks. A major leak opens in the hull, slowing the tanker as it struggles against the waves. The rolling sea soon tilts the ship violently, and the hull suddenly snaps in half. At the Coast Guard station, Bernie and his colleagues listen tensely to radio reports about another ship, the Fort Mercer, which has also been damaged. They learn that rescue crews from Boston and Nantucket are already on the way, and rumors spread that the Chatham station, where Bernie works, will be called next. Outside, the storm rages fiercely, with winds gusting to 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, Bernie goes to his commander, Clough, to ask for permission to get married. Clough brushes him off and immediately orders the crew to assemble, directing them to head to the docks and secure a fishing boat for the rescue mission. Back on the Pendleton, the surviving crew members pray for their safety. We then learn that the ship has broken apart, and only half of it remains afloat in the fierce storm. A crewman named Brown demands immediate action to lower the lifeboat, but the captain disagrees, saying such a small boat cannot survive in the raging sea. To make matters worse, their SOS signal and radio are damaged, leaving them unable to contact anyone. The captain then turns to a crewman named Seibert, who is knowledgeable about such situations, and asks for his opinion. Seibert explains that using the lifeboat is impossible, as it can only hold 9 people, and in the storm, it would likely capsize almost immediately. However, the broken ship can stay afloat for about 4 to 5 hours. Seibert devises a daring plan. They will manually move the ship's rudder with a steel beam and some ropes, steering the Pendleton toward a nearby reef. Once there, they can run the ship aground and signal for help by blowing the whistle. The crew members agree to work on the plan, but Brown remains stubborn and starts arguing. In the midst of their argument, the radio is suddenly connected and reports that another ship, the Fort Mercer, has also been wrecked, with rescue crews on their way. The crew realizes with horror that the Pendleton can only wait its turn for help, and there's a high chance they won't be rescued at all. Back with Bernie, he talks to Miriam on the phone, and she asks if he has asked Clough for permission, but he says he hasn't had the chance, and then, abruptly, hangs up. It turns out that Clough has announced to the entire crew that they must sail the CG 36,500 from Old Harbor to rescue the Fort Mercer, 30 kilometers east of Nantucket. Almost everyone refuses, because it is a death trap in which they will undoubtedly die. In such stormy conditions, they recommend taking the CG 36383 from Stake Harbor, which is slightly slower but safer. Clough then asks Bernie to go to the docks with 2 members to investigate the situation. Bernie has no choice but to agree and heads out with the 2 men. Meanwhile, on Pendleton, Seibert and his partner are struggling to reassemble the manual steering due to a shortage of men. Seibert then learns that Brown has gathered a group of men on deck, and they are about to leave by lifeboat. This makes him lose his temper, so he heads to the deck with an axe. Amidst the crew's loud commotion, Seibert cuts the lifeboat's rope with his axe. The lifeboat falls overboard, and an angry Brown rushes to attack Seibert while the others try to stop him. However, the crew notices the lifeboat breaking apart in seconds under the rolling waves, waves and realizes Seibert was correct. After things calm down, Seibert tells the crew that the lifeboat is too small for the sea, while this ship will sink by nightfall. He explains that to make it safely to the nearest island, he needs 4 men to maneuver the rudder beam, followed by 4 men at the pumps and horns. The crew ultimately follows Seibert's instructions, which prove to be the most reliable at the time. Elsewhere, Bernie and his colleagues arrive at the pier during a heavy snowstorm. A man who has just returned from the sea informs them that he heard a ship's horn and saw from a distance that a vessel was in distress. Bernie takes his colleagues back to the Chatham station to investigate, and they discover that the ship that is broken apart is Pendleton, located about 8 kilometers from their station. 2 ships breaking apart in a single day is unprecedented, and the crew faces a daunting situation. Meanwhile, the Boston and Nantucket stations have sent all available ships to rescue the Fort Mercer. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Clough orders Bernie to gather a crew and board the CG 36,500. Bernie agrees. So, the crew asks him how he can be calm, especially since some members barely survived the previous rescue. Bernie assures them that he knows the waters well and will do his best, regardless of the outcome. When gathering the team, Gus wants to go, but he turns out to be too sick. Thus, 3 Coast Guards, Richard, Andy, and Irvin, volunteer to join Bernie, and together they prepare to head out. Elsewhere, Miriam senses that something is wrong and calls the station to speak with Bernie. He hears the call but has no time to answer and rushes off to carry out the rescue mission. At the same time, Pendleton's condition deteriorates quickly. Towering waves slam against it, tilting it nearly 90 degrees, and water floods the compartments, threatening to sink it at any time. On the other hand, Miriam arrives at the Chatham station, where she meets Bernie's colleagues and becomes furious to learn that he has gone on such a dangerous mission. Meanwhile, on the Pendleton, the men hold on tightly to the chains to keep from being thrown around by the heavy beams. However, a massive wave strikes the ship, flooding it and washing away anything loose, including the oars. An iron bar hits the ship's side, punching a large hole, and soon Seibert struggles to control the ship, putting them in a desperate position. Elsewhere, Miriam learns that Bernie is about to cross a large sandbar, which increases her worry even more. She confronts Clough in his office, even though others try to stop her. Clough realizes that she is the girl Bernie was talking about and tells her that their wedding plans are none of his concern and that asking for permission is merely a formality. But Miriam begins arguing, demanding to know why he sent Bernie on such a risky mission when Clough himself doesn't understand the waters. She insists that he call Bernie and the crew back immediately, but Clough only grows annoyed and kicks her out. Afterward, a furious Miriam storms out of the station and rushes to her car. As she speeds off, the icy road makes her skid and she crashes, leaving her trapped. Elsewhere, Bernie and his team are in a small boat, feeling the full force of the strong winds. Bernie steers as captain, while the others sit at the very front on the outer deck, watching for large waves. Irvin begins singing a song to help relieve tension, and his teammates join in. But before they know it, the ocean's fury strikes all of a sudden. Huge waves slam into their small boat with tremendous force, which sends them into a state of panic. Irvin and Richard cling to the deck as tightly as they can, struggling to stay on as the waves batter them. Next, Bernie pushes the boat forward and carefully navigates over a shallow sandbar. He skillfully jumps over a large wave, but they soon realize the compass is lost. To make things worse, the starter engine fails, and Andy tries to fix it. Suddenly, another massive wave rises ahead, and they have only 5 seconds before the 10-meter-high wave could capsize the boat. Fortunately, the engine comes back to life just in time, and Bernie skillfully navigates the small boat through towering waves, finally clearing the dangerous sandbar. As night falls on Pendleton, one of the pumps stops working. Seibert rushes to check the panel and tells the crew to use all the remaining pumps to keep the water out. They fix the switch so the pumps won't fail under full use. With only half a meter of space before water reaches the engine, they carefully turn the ship 30 degrees and reverse it, preparing for the strong waves ahead. Soon, the bottom of the ship hits the rocks and shakes everyone violently. They manage to land safely, but must act quickly to keep water from flooding the pumps and maintain the engine's power. Meanwhile, Miriam, whose car has been damaged, calls for help in the middle of the road. Soon, a woman driving with her 2 children stops and offers Miriam a ride, saying her brother can help fix the car. Miriam explains that she was at the Chatham station to check on the situation with her fiancé, Bernie, and surprisingly, the woman recognizes him. Back on the Pendleton, the men do everything they can to stabilize the ship, but struggle immensely. Amid the chaos, Brown erupts again and complains that the waves keep pushing them back, and accuses accuses Seibert of doing all this to seek recognition. He mocks Seibert for having nothing to lose, since he doesn't have a wife or children like most of the men on board. Seibert reveals he's also scared like them, and his life is just as valuable as anyone else's. Meanwhile, Bernie and his colleagues are still struggling with the waves. They then contact Chatham Station, but they get frustrated because the operator can't listen, even though they can still hear the other side clearly. They also receive a report that the ship CG-36383 did not continue the rescue because it was too dangerous with the air pressure and heavy snowfall. The group thinks the waves are too high and maybe they should go back, but Bernie refuses to abandon the mission as they've come so far. Elsewhere, Miriam arrives at the woman's house, where she turns on the radio and learns that the Boston Coast Guard has reached Fort Mercer. During the accident, 4 crew members died and others suffered from hypothermia. The broadcast says the search will continue the next morning. Miriam turns off the radio as the woman enters and tells her that Bernie is a good man. She explains that Bernie and his crew did everything they could to save her late husband, who had been fishing off Nantucket. Back on the Pendleton, the ship gradually starts sliding off the reef while the crew waits for rescue in the break room. Water floods the engine inlets, causing the engine to stall and the generators to fail. With the outside lights gone, the ship becomes much harder for the Coast Guard to see. After a grueling struggle, Bernie and his crew finally spot the Pendleton and let out a sigh of relief. The men on the ship see them too, and their faces lighten up with hope that someone is willing to risk the storm to save them. But there's a major problem. Bernie's small boat can only hold 12 people, far fewer than the men who need rescuing. Undeterred, the Pendleton crew jumps into the raging sea and tries to get on the boat. Bernie skillfully maneuvers the boat closer, while Irvin and Andy struggle to pull each man from the icy water. Later, a guy named Eldon trembles and is terrified to jump into the sea. Seibert moves close and urges him to carefully descend the ladder. Another crew member, Tiny, steps forward and says, "If I can do it, anyone can." Without hesitation, Tiny leaps directly to the small boat without the ladder. However, due to the ship's violent shaking, his body is slammed against the hull, resulting in his tragic death and drowning. Everyone is shaken by the horrific scene before their eyes. This makes Eldon, who is still clinging to the ladder, even more terrified. Then, Seibert gives Eldon courage by signaling him to get ready to jump straight onto the small boat. The terrified boy finally throws himself and lands safely, where he is caught by Bernie's 2 teammates. The small boat is already overloaded, and Richard suggests returning and continuing the rescue the next day. However, Bernie refuses and insists on bringing everyone aboard, knowing Pendleton could sink within minutes. After nearly everyone has made it down to Bernie's boat, only Brown and Seibert remain on the deck of Pendleton. Brown commends Seibert for his leadership, insisting he deserves the honor of being the last to leave. All the remaining crew reach the boat safely except Tiny, who tragically drowned earlier. Bernie's team successfully rescues 32 crewmen, and soon Pendleton sinks rapidly right before their eyes. Meanwhile, Miriam returns to the Chatham Station, where she, Clough, and the entire crew hear Bernie over the radio. He reports that he has successfully rescued the Pendleton crew, but unfortunately, he has lost his compass. This worries everyone, as it seems impossible to find the way back home without it. Clough then orders Bernie to proceed 5 miles northeast to the Pollock lightship and unload all the survivors, but Bernie refuses to listen and turns off the radio, leaving everyone at the station stunned. Suddenly, the station lights go out, followed by a citywide power outage, which means the crew will have an even harder time navigating back through the town. Meanwhile, we learn that Bernie disobeyed his commander's orders because he knows the waters much better. When leaving, the wind blew from the left until they finally saw Pendleton, and now the wind is blowing from the right. Bernie, confident in his direction, follows the shoreline lights and instructs all of the passengers to trust him. He tells them to let the current carry the boat, even if it drifts far, as long as they can eventually reach the shore. Once the storm calms down, they will be able to look for lights on land to guide them. Elsewhere, Miriam and the other townspeople drive their cars to the pier and turn on their headlights to guide Bernie in. Miriam keeps staring out at the sea, waiting for safety and the return of her future husband. After a long and bitterly cold journey, a ray of hope finally lights up Bernie and his crew. They follow the current until they spot a brightly lit shore, which turns out to be their home. Eventually, the small ship CG-36500 reaches the pier safely, and everyone cheers and celebrates Captain Bernie's success. The passengers disembark with relief, but Bernie stays on the boat looking completely exhausted. Miriam hugs him joyfully, and the reunited couple leaves the boat while discussing their upcoming wedding. Miriam says that she asked Clough for permission, while he laughs and says it was just a formality. The movie concludes with real photographs showing the aftermath of the rescue. 2 months later, Bernie and Miriam married and remained happily together for 58 years until Bernie's passing in 2009. For their extraordinary bravery, Bernie and his crew were honored with the Gold Life-Saving Medal.